Barry Dunn. We're a consulting firm. We're headquartered in Portland, Maine, and we're part of what's called the Local Government Practice Group, part of Parks, Recreation, and Libraries. And this is what we do. We do consulting all across the country, master plans, feasibility studies, needs assessments, all kinds of things. With me, I have Lisa Wolf, a senior consultant with Barry Dunn, and Dan Biggs, manager, principal. I'll get him promoted. I'm working on that. All right. So actually, I could have shown you our pictures. That might have helped. So as Mark said, we're very happy to be here. We've been working with the town for more than a year. We're doing what's called a Park and Recreation Master Plan. We're doing a comprehensive assessment of the parks, the facilities, the programs. As Mark said, it'll be a guiding document when we're all done. We went through this presentation with Mark and his team earlier today, and at the end you'll see how we finish up with some goals and objectives, and we'll have recommendations, and we'll actually even have an implementation plan. And hopefully when all that is completed, the town will be able to kind of print that section of this report, have all the other sections as a document to show how we got there, but it'll be a guide of things that they should consider doing in the next 1, 2, 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7, 10 years. So that is our goal. Lisa's going to take you through the very beginning of how we got up to the survey, and then I'll take over during the survey, and then Dan will jump in when we get to the level of service analysis, and I'll come back for the recommendations. What I just wanted to say is there's many parts to a project like this, and we've already presented everything we learned in our initial information gathering back when we were here before, so we've kind of shortened everything up for this. Hopefully that makes sense. Lisa?
Thanks, Tom, and it's great to see some familiar faces. I think many of you were engaged in the engagement process when we were here back in the fall, and so it's great to have you still here and still engaged with us. So basically, I'm going to have to move because I don't like turning my head that way, if that's okay. I think he said this moves, right? Yeah. So we basically had a pretty robust information gathering process, and you can see here we interviewed folks like you, the stakeholders, the town executive leadership, council members, the commission, a lot of commission members, and public school officials that attended those meetings. We also took a deep dive with the staff itself through a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats meeting. And really that was organization-wide across the whole department to get their feedback on what this plan could entail. And then the focus group participants, which you can see here. So we had roughly about 75 participants in the overall focus group meeting. So keep in mind, this is just that piece of engagement, just focus groups when we were here back in the fall. You can see here the statistics we had based on the age breakdown. 35% have basically resided in Groton for more than 10 plus years. And then going up, you have 29% over 20 plus years. And then it drops off a little bit with the 5 to 9 years at 18%, and then less than 5 years at 10%, and then 8%. So that's really your community makeup of those that participated in the 75 participants through engagement. So during those engagement meetings, many of you saw these questions very similar. What are the key issues that we coming into this plan should be aware of, and what those values are? So first here we'll talk about some of the key issues. So here the highest one is basically the town of Groton has become more of a regional department. In other words, this department is doing a lot of programming regionally versus just for the town residents. The government structure is unique in a negative way. There was a lot of value in turf versus grass discussions. The facilities are being used by many outside organizations and groups. Climate change and green initiatives should be valued more. The EB 2,000 plus staff increase of sub-production basically continues to be on the horizon. And then Fort Griswold, and then the push to develop schools into housing areas, and then budgetary value and priority were all those values that the focus groups brought to our attention. Then we talked about the key issues. We basically see a sense of community is, do we have these backwards? It says values. Key issues are values, okay. This is the value part, okay. Sense of community is a strong value. The diversity, basically, the transient nature and hospitality. You're basically a seasonal town sometimes, with a lot of folks coming in for the summer months and into the fall. The quality of life is a great value for this community. Natural resources, of course, being close to the water. The Parks and Rec is very hospitable. There's a lot of historical value within the community. The sports are a big value. A lot of folks, I think some of you folks here tonight represent sports organizations or have children heavily involved in that. Programs are inclusive, great local small stores, and then the ease of navigation within the town is easy. Equity of the state and perpetuity of residence, which you saw based on the number of years of residency. Then we talked to them about what the priorities are in the town that should be considered moving forward when we're developing the Parks and Recreation Plan. So this is probably a little hard to read, so I'll just go through and read them. The first one is aquatic facility, some type of an aquatic facility, whether that be indoor, outdoor. We're not there yet, but certainly that everybody that participated felt that was a high priority in the focus groups. Some type of a community recreation center, whether that's multi-generational, whether that's for just a regular recreation center, maybe it could be tied to an aquatic facility, to be determined. And then lighted outdoor field complex for multiple use play for athletic events, multi-use trails or priorities, staffing. I know Mark's had some staffing challenges, and that continues part-time as well as full-time to maintain those levels and should remain a priority. Property maintenance that the town already owns and has is a priority and should always remain that. An achievable plan, making sure that this plan is achievable, that we're not just going to put a book in front of you and say it's going to sit up on a shelf. It's up to you all as residents to help carry that through with supporting the initiative moving forward. And then just going down, budget and funding, addressing the underserved, want everyone to see yourself within the plan, not just for certain areas of the community. Inclusivity for differently abled folks, equal access, fields and aquatic facility together. A future investment should be a priority for this, for Parks and Recreation. Realistic projections for growth, and that clear master plan that doesn't change. Parking facilities, as well as the expansion of Avery Point agreement. So now that was basically the focus groups engagement slides. Now I'll let Tom walk you through the survey.
Thank you, Lisa. So what you saw there were things that people told us during the focus groups. We took all of those to help generate the questions that we then asked in the survey. We also visited all of your parks in advance of the survey. We toured with Mark extensively and had conversations with staff, so that helped us build our survey. So the purpose of the survey was to study what the community really wanted in this plan. What were some of the priorities for facilities, amenities, future planning, communication, and more. And this presentation will be given to Mark and can be posted on the website so you can see it later as well. The survey research was designed to help assist the town in developing a plan that reflects the community and is implementable. We ended up with 501 total surveys, which is a pretty good number. What was impressive is that we had 330 people fill out the invitation survey. That's what makes it statistically valid. And we had a confidence rate of 5.4%. What that tells us is the questions that were asked in the survey and answered by the survey participants are statistically similar to what other people in the community would say if you asked more and more and more people. That's the way surveying works. The Open Link survey, we had 171 people take the survey. That's a good number. Some communities, the Open Link is a higher number than the statistically valid, and some it's the other way around. Our interpretation of this is that the people that took the statistically valid survey, it was a good turnout. The people that took the Open Link, while it might have been smaller, we saw what they were saying in the survey. They had things to say. So we feel that we've done, between that and all of our other touch points, which I'll show you at the end, we feel that we've got a good handle on the parks, the facilities, the programs and services in the community, and what are the desires, and then we'll put together an implementable plan from that. These are what are called the key findings that our survey firm pulls out of the survey. The two surveys were compared side by side. The statistically valid survey and the Open Link survey both had a strong response. Together, they provide an excellent source of input. The survey results are presented in formats that show the responses for each sample. On a lot of the slides, they'll show the responses side by side. In general, responses from the Open Link survey are similar to the invitation survey. That's a very positive finding because it confirms or shows consensus in what we heard. Had the Open Link survey been totally different, that's a little bit of a different story. The entire survey report has been provided to the town, and that will be available on our website as well. Today we're going to go through several of the slides, but not all 70 slides that are in the survey deck. There's high level of participations in the programs and facilities, as well as a strong rating of satisfaction. So about 74% of the invite sample and 87% of the Open Link respondents use the town's park and recreation programs and facilities. That's very strong. A lot of times we'll see in the invitation survey, because that just randomly shows up in people's houses, a lot of times we see a lot of people don't use any of the programs or services. And sometimes they kind of give a negative response to the survey because they don't use it and they don't see value in it. The quality of the parks and facilities all rated 3.6 and above on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being highly satisfied. We're always trying to make sure we're above 3. We'd like to get into the 4 range, so that shows there's some room for improvement, but overall it's good. Trails and pathways, as well as the town parks, are frequently used amenities. 15 to 70% of the both samples use them at least once a week. That's huge. A lot of times we hear 15 to 17% of the participants know where the park is or have used it in the last year, but very rarely do we hear that they're using them every week. So your community is getting out and using your parks and facilities. 70% of the invite sample said they used the hiking trails. 60% said they used the walking and jogging. So that tells us that the connectivity and the trails are very important. The thing that I like that you'll see as we go through this is everything that we're seeing keeps backing up the same type of information. So we developed some very good themes. Outdoor recreation is highly important to both samples. The invitation sample showed that the open space is rated a 4.5 out of 5, and the Open Link was at 4.4. So again, the statistically valid survey was very similar to what the people that chose to give information. Both samples agree that enhancement and maintenance of parks and facilities and adding aquatic facilities would increase the use. In the bottom bullet there, we hear that everywhere we go. There's room for improvement in communication. You'll see in a subsequent slide, we ask people, how do you want to be communicated with? And they tell us how they want to be communicated. And then we ask them, how are they communicated? And it's the way they want to, but then they say they want better communication. That's across every project we have. But again, it wasn't bad, but there's room for improvement. The top 3 future needs from both samples, the invitation and the open link: increase trail and pathway connectivity, consider adding indoor facilities, consider an aquatic facility, and improve access to natural bodies of water. Future values that are most important from the invite sample are conservation and protection of natural resources and providing affordable activities. And then finally, we asked people, if you had $100, how would you spend it? Both samples responded that they'd spend the greatest amount of their $100 on trails and pathways, swimming pools, and then a recreation center. Okay? What I want to say right here is this is helping us to build our themes and later on our recommendations. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to recommend that the town does everything. Some of it is saying we've identified alternative service providers in the area, and the town just needs to help explain that maybe access to the water is available at the state park, things like that. So then this is the demographics of the survey, and we did a demographic study, and what was good is the people that took the survey have a similar demographic. So we heard from, as far as the invite survey, the largest number of people that took that were between 25 and 34. But we did have people in every age category. We had people entering the beginning of being in that 55-plus range. We had the 55-year-olds, the 65, and the 75-year-olds. And in the open link, it's fairly similar. Overall, the majority of people were also similar to the invitation survey. And this was a little different. We had a higher percentage of males than females. Usually we have more females take the survey. And it actually happened in the open link where more females took the survey. And the overall came out slightly higher with females. But what we liked about this information, we had a good number of males, we had a good number of females, we had a good number of young people, middle-aged people, every category. We didn't miss somebody. This talks about the household makeup. You can see that we heard from people that have children at home. We heard from people that don't have children at home. We heard from people that are single. We heard a little bit stronger from the open link, people of children at home. A lot of that is they're usually the groups of people that participate in a lot of your programs and services. But we also heard from, a number of couples that no longer have children. They might be 55 and over. Their children don't live with them any longer, and we heard from them. So again, we thought we heard a nice diversity of people. We asked about where they live in the town of Groton. Many people said they lived in the city of Groton in the invitation survey. More people said they lived in Mystic in the open link, and we kind of heard that maybe people wanted to say they lived in Mystic. Not exactly sure, but we had people living in all the different areas, so we were pretty happy with that as well. We asked about the length of time in the town. Back when you saw the slide Lisa showed you about the focus groups, we wouldn't have been done doing our focus groups until we talked to people in every category. If every person had come into our meeting and just moved here yesterday, we would have keep trying to find people to talk to. And if everybody had been here for over 20 years, we would have, again, wanted to find. You can see here that we had people that lived 2 to 5 years, a good percentage, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, and over 20. The only one that was kind of low was less than 1 year. But when you think about it, if you just moved here, you probably might not have gotten a statistically valid survey because you might not have been here, and you might not really know what's going on. So we were comfortable with that. We asked about participation. This, to me, was very impressive. In the invitation survey, 74% of the people that took the invitation survey said they participate in parks and facilities. And that end number at the bottom is 312 of those people that took the statistically valid survey still answered this question. So the people that took that survey are actually participants. So it's not people that don't participate and are trying to tell everyone else what to do. The open link was even higher at 87. So we were very satisfied with that. We asked about satisfaction in parks and recreation. What I've highlighted in red is the average score. The blue to the far right is how many people said that it scored a 5 out of 5. And to the far left, the orange would, or the purple that you don't see on a few, are how many people said it was that score. But the average is really what we're looking at. Both the invitation and the open link thought the quality of the parks were 3.9. So that's a positive, but it shows there's room for improvement. The quality of programs was a 3.8 and a 3.9. Again, very positive, but there's some room for improvement. Quality of facilities, 3.7, 3.6. So, again, pretty good, but some room for improvement. We asked about current usage. What amenities do they use the most? The most frequently used amenity was similar in both groups, and that's the hiking trails, walking and jogging, Esther Point Beach, the restrooms and playgrounds were the highest used amenities in both of our survey. The open link people use the dog parks in the community center and Thrive 55 a little bit more frequently than the invitation. And a small number indicated that they didn't use any of the facilities, 2% and 5%, very small numbers. So while those people might not have used it as an amenity, we believe they took part in a service or a program. We asked about the importance of current facilities and programs. Here you can see it's that same type of scale, and what I've highlighted in red are the ones that were above 3.5. More than half of the invite sample rated open space, natural areas, trails and pathways, neighborhood parks, and water access a 5 out of 5. The highlighted amenities are all rated 3.5 or above. The volleyball courts, Milk Creek Disc Golf Course, and pickleball courts were all rated a little bit lower. So again, that just meant the people that took the survey, not as many people thought those were important. And I know that the town has heard an awful lot from pickleball players, and that is a big thing, and it's very important everywhere. But again, sometimes it's a smaller group of people that are very vocal. Here we're showing the open link. The last one was the invitation survey. It's very similar. These are things that rated 3.7 or above. Trails and pathways were very important again. Open space, natural areas. Volleyball and the disc golf and pickleball were lower with that group of people as well. Again, that doesn't mean they're not important. We asked what would need to be done to increase use of parks and recreation. Both samples agreed that enhancing the maintenance of the parks and facilities, adding an aquatic facility would increase use. The invitation sample, those are the statistically valid people, they were a little bit more sensitive to user fees. The open link sample felt very strongly about safety and security. But you can see both groups, enhancement of parks maintenance, an aquatic facility, more programs, more restrooms, more facilities, and there's that improved communication. What we like is, if you look at the curves of those little charts and graphs, they're similar, so they're constantly confirming each other or showing there's consensus within the community from the people we heard from. Communication was next, and I already talked to you a little bit about that. Overall, people were an average rating of 3.1. The open link was a little more positive, 3.5. So there is room for improvement there. We asked about how effective it was, and you can see that information here. Here we asked about the current methods of communication. How do they receive the information? Email, and then the activity brochure. Social media was a little higher in the open link, but those are the top 5, the ways people want to receive information. So again, what I was telling you about information is they're all saying they're receiving information in 5 different ways, but they want it to be better, and that's just pretty standard across the community. I think the one thing we did talk to Mark and the staff about today was the activity guide is a great thing. People want that, but maybe we're looking at, maybe we can add a QR code to the activity guide so that when you get that and you're actually looking at it, you could click on that and it would take you to a electronic version that's the newest version, because as soon as they send that out, something's added, something changed, and there's no way they can mail out, them just constantly be mailing them out. We asked about future needs. The top 4 categories that would help with future needs are highlighted off to the left. People want, again, this is a theme coming, increase trail and pathway connectivity, improvements to the existing indoor facilities, a new aquatic, outdoor pool, improve access to the natural bodies of water. The invitation sample was a little stronger in their opinion about the natural bodies of water. Both samples in this group said there wasn't as much of a need for synthetic turf. So a couple things that we see here is the natural body of water thing. We're looking at what can the town do to add access to the natural bodies of water, and what it might be, again, is telling people where there is access and how you can access it that already exists. The synthetic turf, what that tells us is, as we do our work, if we determine there's a need for more fields and that there might not be enough space to add more fields and that we're doing anything related to recommending synthetic turf, and we're not there yet, but if we are, that tells us that there definitely needs to be more education about the pros and cons of synthetic turf and how it's changed today from years before. Again, no decision with that has been made, but I'm just kind of telling you what we learned. We did ask a question about athletic fields, and people are saying that their top choices for athletic fields, soccer, baseball, lacrosse, softball type of fields, pretty strong in both the open link and the invitation sample. Soccer was a priority of what we heard. So Dan is going to talk to you in a little bit about some of the work he's done, but some of what we're trying to look at is to determine, is there an adequate number of fields out there already? Is it a matter of letting people know what other fields they could maybe access, or what fields might you need? We asked about aquatics because we heard about aquatics so much during the focus groups. 4 out of 5 scored that they rated aquatics as very important. We asked them about what type of activities would they like to participate in. Water fitness classes, recreational lap swimming, water therapy, swim lessons were the top on all of them. When we averaged them out, it's in that order. It's very close between water fitness classes and recreational lap swimming. That was in the invite sample, and then if you look at the open link sample at the bottom, it's very similar. And again, we're going to look at, is there a need to recommend aquatics facilities, or is there a need to recommend how can people access aquatic facilities and programs? We asked about the top 3 future priorities, and I do realize my box has more than 3, but if you go over to the right, it's where they're averaged overall, first, second, and third choice. So in that average, the top thing is increasing trail and pathway connectivity, followed by a new aquatic facility, indoor pool, followed by improved access to natural bodies of water. But also important, listed in there, is improving existing outdoor athletic fields, passive recreation, any indoor fields. So over to the right, you see we kind of what I just said summarized. That was the invite sample. This is the open link sample. The number one thing was an aquatic facility or indoor pool, trail and pathway connectivity, improve existing outdoor athletic fields. So I hope you're seeing that we're constantly coming back to the same things in some themes. Program needs, fitness classes, arts, craft, educational classes, all ages, health and wellness classes were the top. And this is a combination of the invitation and the open link. And again, you can see that the invitation and open link are pretty similar. The open link had a few more people talk about 55 plus focus groups and cultural programs. Financial choices. We asked people if they had money to budget and they had $100, how would they spend it? The blue column is invitation, the orange is open link. Over to the right is the overall kind of average. Top three things people said if they had money to spend on would be trailways and pathways, swimming pools, and a recreation center. And they were very close. There was a list of other, and they all get combined, so that $7 total isn't one specific other thing. It's all the other things that could be done. You know, somebody said, I'd spend $1 on this out of my 100. I'm going to turn this over to Dan to talk about the level of service, and then we'll continue.
Thanks, Tom. So my name is Dan Biggs. I'm a landscape architect with Weston Sampson, and I have the best part of the project. I get to go to every single park with my team. So as Tom and Lisa have gone through, there's a lot that goes into the plan, right? We have the survey, we have the focus groups, we have just the overall conversation and what the needs of the community are. But part of that is also knowing what you have, what's working, what's not working. So we go, myself and my team, we go to every park. I'm going to run through of everything we've done. Not every park, but we assess every park, every component, every feature of every park. We broke up the town into quadrants just for ease, and the overall goal of what we're looking at here is there coverage of parks, trails, facilities within the town that covers that everyone has access to these facilities, and then what's the diversity of these facilities offerings within the town. So we don't want to forget that there's a lot of other alternative service providers or state park lands, other lands that are accessible that anyone can go to that's available for residents to use in addition to the town's facilities. So we've ran through the quadrants. As we're looking at each park area, as you can see here, the cursor doesn't work on the screen. Park area here. We're showing in this a buffer area around every park. It's a 1/4 mile buffer. That's a reasonable 5-7 minute walk or so if you're taking your time to get to the park. But it's a distance that's reasonable to think that a family or any age resident could get to the park space. We actually add a 1/2 mile radius around every park to show coverage as well. To note that if you were to ride a bike or if you choose to walk a little faster, you could still usually get there. In this assessment that we're looking at this level of service, we're not looking at where is the coverage area, but we're acknowledging where are the major barriers to parks as well. So as we have I-95, although it may look in the screen here of having coverage through here, you really can't get through I-95 easily. It's a pretty significant barrier within the town. So while we're looking at every park, we're looking at how is there coverage within our neighborhoods, where is the location of our schools, if those lands are available for recreation use or outside of school time period uses, and really assessing as to what's available for residents to use on an ongoing basis. So we went through all the park areas. See here, large state-owned parcels, accessible for residents to use, in addition to many parks within a more denser community area. To really get an idea as to what is the level of service available for residents within the town. So this here is one of, 50 tables where we have gone through, here's Esker Point Beach, looked at every single feature within that park. We have not only identified it, but also given a rating of a 1 to 3 scale. 1 meaning not really meeting the grade. 3 is it's above what we expect for a municipal town facility, and 2 is right in the middle. So some have a 2.5, some have a 3, and then we quantify as much as possible to the number of that component, that feature. In addition, we have comments that we are identifying to why do we come up with this scoring. This is not only for this master plan, but also for staff to use after this. That they could say, look, we think, we see there's a 1 in the basketball court. Mark may say, okay, staff, we're going to fix the basketball court at Esker Point Beach. And says, okay, pavement and goals and poor condition, no striping and seal coat. That's an item for him to simply say, if we want to go fix those basketball courts, this is what we have to do to bring it up to par, bring it up to snuff to get it above a 1 rating. So we've gone through every park facility with this table that we then summarize in this massive table that gives us a rating of every feature, every park. So like what Tom and Lisa have been talking about of how we're collecting all this data, this is one component that we're starting to look at is saying, where is the town falling short? Where are you meeting the grade? And where are you exceeding expectations to offerings within the town as a whole? All this come together, we come up with overall recurring themes for all these needs and wants within the town for how we can improve our parks and recreation facilities. From there, Tom's up again.
Thank you, Dan. So as Dan said, here we're showing you that we developed reoccurring themes from all of these tools. So we didn't come up with our ideas just on the focus groups. We didn't come up with them just because we talked to staff or stakeholder meetings. It wasn't just a community survey. It was what Dan did. It's looking at your programs and assessing them. It's looking at your organization, looking at how your parks are maintained. So these are all the type of things that we've done, and then meetings like this. If you have something to say tonight that we've missed something, we'll go back and take a look at that. These are the reoccurring themes in no particular order that we've been building upon. There is a high-quality staff. They have great programs for all ages. There's good trails and open spaces. There's a lack of lighting in the fields or on the fields. There's a lack of aquatic facilities and programs, despite being close to the water. Budgeting could be an issue. Right now, staffing is a struggle, and we've heard that throughout the project. There's room for more programming for toddlers, tweens, and young adults. There's a need for an indoor recreation facility. We are aware we've held meetings in your recreation centers that are in schools that have been taken out of service. I think what people are saying are they'd like a more traditional recreation center. There's a need for year-round aquatics. I know that I talked about aquatics before, but there people are saying it needs to be year-round. So that would potentially lead to that people are saying there's a need for indoor. Restrooms need to be available at all facilities. Trail improvements are needed. Planning and structure isn't thought out as much as it should be. So to explain that, that's not a knock on Mark or the current staff. What we are seeing and what we heard from people is that you have parks that weren't truly master planned totally, and something was done in the park that maybe had you known what you were going to do, you might have done differently. An example of that is like this room was designed to be this. If we were going to also use it for pickleball or something, we probably wouldn't have wanted his area blocked out there because it's a danger, and we wouldn't have wanted this to be permanent furniture. So, in some of your parks, maybe you put parking down by the water when you first developed the park because everyone wanted to get to the water. And now you have amenities that are on the other side of parking. Community members value the sense of community in the parks. Diversity in and of the parks is key. Again, there's a desire for a priority to have an aquatic facility and a community recreation center. So people are saying if you're going to do it, put them both together. The community would like a focus on maintaining what we have, making those facilities safe, fun to use, and unique. That's telling us that we need to make sure that our plan doesn't put you in a position that you're no longer taking care of what you have because you're trying to do something new. And then finally in this group, trails, parks, adult and youth programs are the most frequently used. So, what's coming? This is a sample recommendation. This is not written for the town of Groton. I threw up a sample. You'll see in there, I think there's the word county somewhere, or it might be the next one, and we realize you're not a county. This is a sample from another project. We don't write this right now because we want to hear what you say, and we wanted to show this to Mark today, and tomorrow we have a visioning workshop with him. But what we'll give you is a goal, improve and expand facilities and amenities. That might be one of your goals. In this program, we believe, looking at the key issue matrix, is going to have 6 or 7 big goals like that. And then each goal will have an objective. Like here you see this project had 7 objectives under that one goal. Okay, so if we have 6 goals and each one of them have 6 or 7 objectives, there's 42 different things. And we'll take those 42 different things and we'll turn it into an action step or an action plan. So here in this other project, this was goal 1, improve and expand facilities and amenities. The objective was to expand pathways and trails and connectivity. And the action, what we recommended the agency do, was to work with other agencies, municipalities, bordering locales, and the county. So again, that's not yours, but you know, we're telling you what we think you should do. We're giving you a capital cost. So if it's like do a study, we tell you what we think a study costs. If it's adding trails, we don't know how many miles of trails, so we'll typically give you a cost, like per linear foot type of thing. We're talking about whether there's an operational budget impact, and then when should you do it? Short term is the next 0 to 2, 3 years, medium term 3 to 5 years, long term 5 to 10 years. Ongoing is something you should always be doing. There are going to be things in our plan, like if you end up with an aquatic center in the plan, that isn't something that you're going to do in the next 6 months or year. And it's going to, you know, would cost some money. So that's something that you kind of put there and you're working towards. But there'll be other things that are easier to do, you should do quicker and are less costly that you want to do. So in other words, you don't want to save every penny till you get to something and not do all these other things. So we're going to try to help you prioritize those. In this project, not yours, but the one I'm showing, their recommendations were in compliance, maintenance, upgrades, and comprehensive things. So that's the end of this little presentation. We'd like to open it up to questions. What have we missed? What, what are things that we should address that we haven't addressed? And like I said, tomorrow we have a visioning session with Mark. We have this, we call it a key issue matrix. We have a spreadsheet with all of the issues that we've heard, and anything we hear tonight we'll add there if it's not there. In the middle, we have whether it was quantitative or qualitative. We put a mark as to, did we hear it during the survey? Did we hear it during the open house? Did Dan see it in his work? Did Lisa and I see it? Did we read it from another study? And those we even score. A as a priority, B as something that needs to be done, C is something to consider in an open space. So we have that, and there's both qualitative and quantitative. And then over to the right, we have the list of all of our preliminary recommendations, which we put together to share with Mark. So tomorrow during the meeting, we'll go through that. We're going to see how far we get, because I think we had about 73 lines of things, and there were 6 or 7 different categories. Some of those we'll combine, some we'll eliminate, we'll add some. But we'll get his feedback. We'll show him how that tool works tomorrow. Then we'll give that tool to him and the team for a week or 2 or a period of time and get their feedback. They'll give that back to us. And then we will write a series of goals, and we'll write a series of objectives and action steps. We'll get that to Mark. When that's all good, we put the whole plan together, and we'll give him a draft plan. And at that time, we'll have a nice executive summary, and we'll add what we call an implementation strategy. So after you get all of that and it gets approved, then there's a section of, now what do we do? And we try to help you with how you go forward, how you keep track of it, how you tell the community what you're doing, all of that. So with that, I'd like to ask question, comments. I'll go back to any slide. Dan or Lisa will answer any question. Yep. If you have a question, just raise your hand and Mark will give you a mic.
It's good?
They can hear.
All right, they said it's good. All right, okay. Maybe it just goes with
Do you want to, should the person identify themselves? Is that necessary? I don't know what your protocol is.
I can do that anyway. Mike DeFranco. So my question is, really liked when you did the parks, you went through each park and did like the survey of good, bad, the ugly, and recommendations to go up. So that's really good. My question for that is, I think that'll be helpful, but say you went to a park, let's just say it was a tennis court. I'm using an example. I don't know if we have a tennis court park, to be honest, but let's just say, you said, oh, well, maybe it's really good or maybe it needs to be resurfaced, whatever. But did you look at and saying, well, when we usually put a tennis court in some place, we recommend that you have benches outside because people usually want to watch and sit. I don't know if that's true or not, but did you go through and say, these are areas for what you currently have and the rating of it, but we also recommend that these are amenities that go in that type of park? Was that part of that or no?
Yes. So on the side, when we're doing our assessment, we're making notes to ourselves as well that'll be brought forward in the recommendation stage to talk about tennis courts. So if there's a series of 4 courts, you may want to have a bleacher, accessible bleachers on the side, at least for one of them, so those that are patrons are waiting to play tennis or are watching tennis have a place to sit. And it may have accessible route to the parking lot, so we can accommodate users of all needs. So that is a side comment while we're assessing all of the parks and spaces and fields that will be brought forward in recommendations to also, at a park-specific basis, identify needs and recommendations.
So it's all on that chart sheet that you had per park or something like that, so to speak?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the hidden cells to the right you aren't going to see is those
But
things
Mark
that we make.
has that type of stuff, as I'm saying.
Yeah, so they'll have those as
Okay.
well.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
And again, we want to make a report that's, we call it implementable. We have people in our team and in our organization. We have one guy who's written a couple 480-page reports, and you need a truck to move it around. We're going to take and give you a report that you can read that makes sense, and then some of the things will be an appendix. So like if you're reading it and you want to know more about it, you can move on to that section. But as I said to Mark earlier today, the goals, objection, action table, and implementation plan is an ending section, and a lot of agencies will take and print that out and bind it and give it to every staff and say, you leave this on your desk, you don't put it on the shelf. Every time you're thinking about doing something, look in there and see, is that what we're supposed to be doing? Next question, comment?
Elizabeth Hogan. Does the assessment of the facilities include a separate report on the ADA compliance level?
So in our assessment, we are observing accessibilities or if there's handicap stalls or not, but we're not doing an ADA audit per se, which would be it's typically a recommendation of a plan like this that you would do that to make sure you're in compliance with the federal guidelines. But as we're looking at, again, like tennis courts, do you have to go through a grass lawn to get to tennis courts, right? That would be non-compliant from an ADA access standpoint. So we'll say no accessible route. We won't say how it should get there, what it should consist of, but it doesn't exist. So we'll acknowledge it, but not do a full audit.
Well, that's what I was really looking for, is make sure that at the end of the day, we end up with an inventory of areas that need attention from an ADA
So
perspective.
an audit would be the normal step to formally produce and
Right.
assess every facility, all width of the gate opening into the tennis courts. Is that compliant or not? They literally have to measure with a tape measure. So we're giving visual comments for Mark to consider, but really next step should be a full audit of facilities, whether it's a parking lot, accessible route, or a tennis court, whatever have it be, to make sure that the town is in compliance. And that is 90%. Usually one of our recommendations that the town does proceed with that to make sure they are in compliance with the ADA guidelines.
Thank you.
So we'll check with Mark to see where the town is as far as having an ADA plan. Every municipality, town and all that is supposed to have one. Not everyone does. Everybody's working towards one. So we'll find out where that's at. And then based on that, we'll either be making a recommendation, follow your town's plan, or push the town to get their plan. But like, as Dan said, in a couple of our projects, part of the project has been an ADA assessment, and it's kind of what Dan did on steroids. And I mean, the person goes, measures every doorway, puts a level on every sidewalk and everything. And that's typical, and we'll make, if you need one, we'll make that as a recommendation of something that you should consider. But on one of my recent projects, that was more costly than this project. Just because, you know.
It's very labor intensive.
Yeah.
You're measuring every door handle for the pounds of resistance, the openings, the slopes. So it's required, but it's a process to assess.
I'm more concerned about the things that aren't identified by the users until
It's a
it
problem.
becomes a barrier.
Yes.
Thanks.
I'll give it back to you. Harry Watson. I think I remember there was a slide where you ranked things, ones, whatever, as far as how quickly they need to be addressed, I think. And my question is about that, is we have a lot of facilities, and I'm sure you've looked at all the school facilities too. I'll give an example. Our football field is in dire need of, the crown has been gone for a decade at least, maybe even more. Is that part of all this stuff that you're doing, and lighting there too, I suppose, would be another one?
Well, here is where you saw that maybe short-term, medium-term, long-term.
Yeah.
So if the school football field is on the list of things that Dan looked at, if it's, part of town parks and recreation,
It's not. It's part of the Board of Education.
so that would be something then that we would not have looked at.
We did not do the school properties, only decommissioned schools that are under purview of parks.
Understood. That's interesting because the schools use the rec department's facilities, so.
But the town doesn't necessarily use all of the schools. But like the field, there's some fields very close to here, a park. We looked at all of those, and we'll make a recommendation of what needs to be done and how soon it should be done, yes.
Okay, and then one other question. You got information from people through two different methods, I saw that, but was there emphasis put on getting feedback from our military community, for instance? Because probably most of them are the 1 to 2 year people that wouldn't know much about it. And another one is, was there any emphasis on asking some of our bigger employers who might want to have great facilities here so they could attract great employees? EB would be the one I was thinking of in particular.
Certainly. So the statistically valid survey is randomly mailed to addresses within the town. So any place that military people, families lived, if they lived in the town, they had as good an opportunity to get the survey as anyone else, so we didn't leave them out. And it was also publicized that they could take the survey. We asked different groups to come to our stakeholder meetings. Mark can only do what he can do as far as who comes and things like that. But everyone in the community and even in the city, as well as the town, had an opportunity to participate. But if you think that there's something we've left out, we'll, take a look at what we can look at. But the school, as Dan said, the school property we didn't evaluate. The same with the state park. What we're doing is identifying that it's there. Maybe that's where you should get your water access. But we're not going in and telling the state park.
Historically, it used to be that way. The water access.
Okay. Other comments or questions?
Hello, everyone. State Representative Andre Baumgartner. I live in the city of Groton as well. And thank you so much for the presentation. Been following your work from afar, and really great to see it get to this point. Certainly want to commend Director Barry as well and his team. Just some themes, Aquatic Center, obviously, the coastal access, and maintaining our incredible trails network. Kind of where do we go from here in terms of implementation?
So tomorrow during our visioning session, we'll talk to Mark and his team about some of those things, and then we'll start giving you information. You know, there's some history as far as what's been tried in the town in the past and things like that. We'll make our recommendations, and then it'll be up to the town to decide first to accept the plan and then to decide what goals and objectives they want to accept. As far as aquatics go, again, we're not done, but I do believe that we're going to make a recommendation that there's some form of an aquatic facility considered. But we're also going to make recommendations that the town does everything that they can within reason to find out what other service providers there are that could be offered to help them possibly. The same with...
Well, I mean, and not to interrupt you, but I think we already know those answers, and we've been utilizing those facilities while we haven't had for example, a pool. I grew up swimming at learning how to swim over at the oral school, of course, and obviously it was a town parks and rec facility, and so I think that's kind of the problem is we don't have one, and we have certainly the great leadership here who's ready to make it happen, but it's going to take some resources. So that's why I asked really about the implementation, because you know, as much as it is an incredible study, but I think it's time to really implement these great ideas that you've helped put together.
We're hoping that what happens here is similar to what happens in a lot of other places. A lot of other places will make recommendations that the department has already been asking for, and I'm not saying it's going to happen here, but sometimes it's kind of like they say, well, why didn't Mark ask for this? And Mark knows he asked for it. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we're in a lot of communities, and then we go in some communities, and we aren't even allowed to ask the pool question or the field question or there's some question. Early on, we're told by leadership, we've been down that road, and we won't entertain it. We weren't told that. So again, we have more data than you had before to take forward. But I think there's the aquatic facility and the water access are maybe two different things. And I do think that there's a lack of understanding in the community of how you could access the water. But I do agree that I don't think there's a lack of understanding in the community about where the pool is. Yes, sir?
You said a couple of things were two separate things. What were they? What I'm getting at, it looks to me from listening to your slide, and I forgot to say thank you. Thank you very much for doing this presentation tonight. The one thing that does seem to go together a lot is a recreational a facility, a rec center, and the aquatics, and the indoor pool. It would make sense that was all one big, of course, the resources, as Andre is saying, but it sounds to me that should be coupled together.
Anecdotally, what we see across the country is if you're able to develop what's called a community recreation center that has aquatics with it, and that community recreation center has gymnasium space, meeting space, group exercise space, possibly a walking track, programming space, really ideally some could be hockey, but we're up in Maine and looking at that, and usually some type of fitness equipment space. When you add the aquatics to it, it's another jewel. A standalone aquatics typically is a little bit more difficult to operate, but what people in the community are telling us is you want to get up as a family and go to a facility, and whether it's a husband and wife or a couple or people are visiting, whatever, but be able to walk in the door and say, I'm going to take Dan and we're going to go do this. Well, Lisa and Mark go do this, and everybody's happy, and then in 30 minutes, I'm gonna do something with Mark, so Lisa, you know, that type of thing, where if you just go to a box gymnasium, you're either doing it or you're not doing it. But again, it's just something we're gonna recommend, and the community's gonna have to see where that goes. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to know, thank you. I think it was very logical. My background is along those lines, so it's very well laid out. And a couple of thoughts, or questions rather, are in this. Do you also recommend out-of-the-box funding sources? So you're going to recommend funding, you're going to recommend costs, but I got news for you as a taxpayer. You know, I know things cost money, but I mean, you have the federal government. The big thing with the federal government now, especially military and stuff, they're out of money too, but they have some. So there's ways where you can combine resources other than just lay it on more taxes on the average taxpayer. That's one thing. So I don't know if you want to address that.
Sure. So we don't actually tell you that you need a recreation center and that we know it's going to cost $40 million to build, and here's how you should pay for it. But we'll recommend that you might need a recreation center, and here's some things you can do to get you in position to be able to design and build the appropriate facility and know what it's going to cost to build and operate, and know how you can potentially fund it. Typically, the construction of facilities is not typically funded through revenue. It's typically funded through some form of bond, grant, partnership, donations, and all of those things. But the operation of a facility, a large portion of it can be subsidized through the actual operation. So a lot of times, you might have to, if a facility is built, you might have to pay a membership or a user fee to use the facility. If you're just going in and using the whole facility like everyone else in your town, it would be one level. If you're going in and taking a class, you're getting a little higher level of service, so you might pay a different amount. If you're getting like a one-on-one instruction or something, then you might pay a higher amount. But we have ways that we can, that's not part of this scope, but should you decide to build something, we have ways that can help you, tell you exactly what should be built, how much it's going to cost to build, what it's going to look like. Here's a package that you can take to the community and ask them, will you support a bond? Will you support sales tax increase? Will you support hotel? You know, the different methodologies and what it might cost to operate.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And
Sure.
two other things. One, in taking the survey and also seeing it here, I understand for survey purposes you have to start somewhere, so you're kind of leading rather than, I guess it seems to me, to get the feedback from truly from the community, what they would like. You're kind of, you know, leading the cart, saying, okay, this is what we would like to see, this is what we think, you know, this is what we have done in other areas, and that you have to do that, right? And that's great. But this part, for a community member, what you're doing today is great. What I didn't see is, how about leading up to the survey, something like this would have been beneficial for the brainstorming, to understand for the community what opportunities are out there, what we might like to see other than what's forced and given.
We did that previously. I'm not sure if you weren't aware or weren't invited, but when we came for the initial public engagement, we did focus groups and stakeholder meetings, and we had a community meeting at the end of that to say, so
Fair enough.
we started off with a blank piece of paper, and we asked 79 residents some things they wanted. We did our own evaluation. We asked everybody in that meeting, what have we missed? So if we were to go back and look at our notes, I'm sure we heard something that night from somebody who was in that meeting who wasn't in the focus group. And every one of the questions, not everyone, but the majority of the questions has a spot where you can enter other and write things in the survey firm, and we read all of those comments. And we grouped them together. And if, like, sometimes we'll have one of these situations and for whatever reason, dog park just didn't make it on the list for something. But if 100 people write in dog park on the survey, then that's something that moves forward, has a theme.
Okay.
So, but again, if you think we've missed, you're right to some extent. You can't just have a survey that, the first question is, what do you want? And not say what, some examples. Like, I'm going to Europa, California in a couple of weeks, and we're going to have a couple open houses as part of the the engagement, and we're going to show boards with pictures of different things. And we're going to say, this isn't exactly what you might get, and we don't know if you want it, but just so you know what we're talking about, this is a picture of people doing group exercise. This is a picture of people swimming. This is a picture of people on a rock wall. This is people in a lifelong learning seminar. This is a picture of a basketball court. This is a picture of an indoor field house, those type of things. And then we're going to have people put dots on them and things. So we're constantly involved in how we do things, but we asked a lot of questions, and we also went out and looked at everything and saw what you're doing. We also look at national trends, regional trends, and local trends.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's a good question.
thanks.
Other questions? Comments? It's okay, it's all right.
I find it interesting. I didn't see any reference to a theater or performance venue. Did that come up at all as a theme?
Yes, it's on one of these slides, but it wasn't very highly addressed. Didn't receive a lot of comments. I know that I saw it. Performing arts rehearsal theater space, right here. And when we asked that question, out of the people that responded, it scored 15%. And that's a great question. Mark is Director of Recreation and Parks and Recreation. Some places Mark is the Director of Community Services. Some places Mark is the Director of Parks, or Mark is the Director of Recreation. So we also try to early on define what exactly, are you trying to do? And I think performing arts in the school was a little bit outside of the realm of what they do. Other questions? We'll get your mic.
Perhaps a segue. You bring up an important point, though, because I believe, for example, there's I wouldn't call it a performing arts facility, but a stage of sorts at the old Fitch Middle School, which is now the recreation center. So thinking about how to use those spaces, I really liked how you shared earlier about, could we double this room as a pickleball room? Well, probably not. But when we're reviewing that space, which is obviously a big part of the scope of work for this study, kind of looking room by room and identifying, how we best utilize those spaces. So maybe perhaps if I know maybe performing arts may not be in the purview of Parks and Rec per se, but maybe thinking creatively about how to use that space to, or at least Parks and Rec to be able to utilize that space for their programming as well.
Thank you. And I think the point you bring up there, as far as alternative providers, we heard a little bit about performing arts, so it may be because, again, there's a facility available that we're working with the town and Mark's department to educate that better. I was thinking as I was sitting over there, an example of alternative providers. We had a landscape architect in another project actually in Colchester, Vermont, working with us, and he was always harping on me that I have a car, because where he lives, he doesn't have a car. He takes public transportation everywhere. And he was telling me that my wife and I, my wife mainly, drives 22 miles to the hospital, and she should take an Uber every day. And I'm like, how is that for a person to drive from Richmond out to our house, we're rural, and drive my wife into work, and do his thing all day, his or her thing all day, and then do it back How is it better than my wife driving it? So in our case, there isn't that alternative provided. But I agree, if we lived in Manhattan or New York City, I don't think we'd have 2 cars. I have friends that live in Manhattan and New York City and don't own a single car because it's expensive to park and everything. They rent a car, like if they're going to go visit somebody in Binghamton or something, they rent a car. But, so I think it's that type of thing where, that was kind of the thing I was trying to get to with the water access.
Mr. Bumgarner, I was part of the Mystic, the oral school project feasibility study a few years ago. So I had been here and was heavily engaged with that, as were many of you. And there was a lot of discussion about theater. That was probably, one of the key forces behind some of that project. And 2 surveys were actually completed. And the identification of the auditorium versus a theater in that facility was identified. Then at the same time, when we were here in the fall, we did tour Fitch, and I, being one who renovated a theater when I was assistant director of Parks and Recreation, have a little soft heart, for that type of a facility. And I think it's much needed in communities. How you go about making that happen, obviously, is the question at hand. Does that become the town's responsibility? There are lots of theater groups that participated in the Oral School and the Mystic Education Center project that we know are, options for partnerships as well. So, just to mention that we did look at that, and that did serve as a background for some of the discussions, and I made Tom aware of all that when I was here. Yeah.
I apologize for sitting down, but I have an alternative provider on the left hip. That's artificial. The right hip is still mine, and it's bothering me. Other questions? Comments? Mark, anything?
So, Elizabeth, to actually answer your question, in 2014, we had somebody come in and do an ADA audit. So we have a really thick binder of all of the work that needs to be done, and we've started on that, and have plans for this coming year to make renovations to the bathroom at Calvin Burrows to make that ADA accessible, both the bathroom and the concession stand. And so we have projects kind of lined up to try to address those as we move forward.
I look like a cadaver if you saw the scars, but anyhow. If you don't have any other questions, we'll wrap up shortly. We're going to meet with Mark and his team tomorrow again to do a visioning session that'll help us develop all of that. We'll be working to get a draft to Mark in the coming month or so. He'll review that, and then they'll get to a point that there'll be a draft that the Recreation Commission, I believe, would review. And then at some point, I believe it will go out and the public will have a chance to look at it. I know that we're coming back at least once, if not twice, to present that. Again, when we do that, everything you just saw now would be a little bit condensed because we don't want to make this meeting to be 3 hours, but we would go and, say, here's all the steps we did, and we would go through more detail, the actual action plan, the goals, objectives, and the implementation plan. So I would like to thank you for your time tonight and appreciate the conversation. If you stay in touch, look at the website, things like that. My contact information is there. This will be given to Mark, and he'll post it. If you have any questions, you can either let Mark know and he'll reach out to me, or you can contact me directly. Okay? Thank you very much.